inevitably winning an Open in Baltimore just about 2 months ago, give or take.
So, John Sukenik winning the die roll, which starts with a turn 2 search for Azcanta. Ross has his turn 2 play of his own in Thing in the Ice.
This is nice. It's like we're getting to watch them get to do what they want on turn 2, and it's two things that kind of need a little time to get going.
And you know, from these early starts, I've seen these matchups is at Phoenix. So last round, we saw in our time-shifted match Jake Mondello play against Drake Sasser. Thing in the Ice was really the whole game plan against humans. They cast Thing in the Ice on turn 2. On turn 3, the deck is able to transform it in one go, bounce the whole creature, the whole board, and attack for 8. This doesn't feel like one of those matchups.
No, you're a little bit more conservative with that flip, but if you can just kill them, you get some free wins.
And Ross going to start out here with Manamorphose. Now he's playing into open blue mana, so he's going to move slow to make sure all this actually resolves.
Spell Snare check.
And so far, we're going to see with that on the stack the Field of Ruin from Sukenik. Takes care of Steam Vents, or also get a basic land. Kind of a green light for Ross to keep going here, though I guess that single blue can still Spell Snare if Sukenik has one. And he does not. Ross actually with no more plays either, so just burning through a Manamorphose to get a better look at the hand.
Right, and at this point we're so deep in the tournament, and both players are kind of notorious for what they are playing, as they've been playing it a lot lately. So Merriam likely knew what Sukenik was playing going into the match and may have kept a threat-heavy hand that's going to have trouble flipping this Thing in the Ice.
Fourth land and a pass. I think both players are sitting on these transform cards. We see Search for Azcanta. Sukenik's going to build up toward that. Ross is building up toward Awoken Horror.
No, you blink first.
I know. Yeah, and this matchup Thing in the Ice mostly just plays like a Tarmogoyf. It's an eventual 7/8 for 2, but that triggered ability doesn't do much work. I mean, there's even potential that Sukenik can get a Snapcaster bounced off it.
Yeah, there are definitely situations where it kind of backfires a little bit, but there's even the point where you kind of want to try to take that last counter off with a little bit of redundancy, because it feels so bad if you put all your eggs in that basket and then Sukenik just goes, say, Bolt Helix.
Right.
Right here, we do see Sukenik missing red, so that is going to be a little bit more difficult, at least for a turn or two. But it's something that's going to be on Ross's mind throughout the match.
Yeah, now with the way this is played out, do you think Ross perhaps thinks he's against an Azorius control deck?
It's unlikely. Well, so it may look like that on the table. This is literally just a matter of player familiarity and him kind of being under the assumption that he knows what Sukenik's doing.
I suppose Sukenik is one of the 2 9-0 players. Usually at a tournament, those players' deck lists aren't secrets.
Exactly. Maybe the specifics of the list aren't on the internet, but you don't miss out on what they're playing when they're at the top tables all day.
Arclight Phoenix attacks in, Sukenik down to 17.
Thopter Snare, is that what it is? Snare
Thopter?
Thopter? Snare
yeah.
Thopter? Just a reasonable Magic card.
5 mana and a tap out here. Sukenik's eyeing a copy of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. And he's going to go for it.
The sooner you develop it, the better. It's just worth more the more turns it's on the battlefield. And there's kind of a point where the longer you wait, the worse it gets for you, because Ross is just going to have access to more resources as the game progresses.
Sukenik picks up his one copy of Secure the Wastes with Teferi. Now, whether or not he'll be able to untap with the Planeswalker here seems in question.
Yeah, it's a little bit tough, but there's almost a point where you're okay with that, right? If Ross spends, say, a Lightning Bolt and an attack with this Arclight Phoenix, that's pretty close to just a Time Walk if you're just eating his whole card.
Teferi's just a remand, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we're pretty okay with those. If Sukenik just has a bunch of these 4 and 5 mana spells clogging his hand, this is just one of the most efficient ways to start emptying them.
Is it Charm from Ross? Takes a counter off of Thing in the Ice. This is the draw 2, discard 2 mode of the card.
Faithless Charming.
So, a question I have about this matchup. If this game goes on until turn 7 and no one really makes any progress, typically that favors Jeskai, but is that true in this matchup?
This matchup's so swingy that it can be hard to tell sometimes, and it a lot of times is defined by how many Phoenixes Merriam actually has. Basically, if both players have a ton of resources, Merriam can just keep spinning his wheels and bringing these stupid Phoenixes back.
So Ross attacks at Teferi, and with the attack, Sukenik cycles a Hieroglyphic Illumination. And I actually like that because there might be a bluff there that Ross thinks Terminus might be in the list, which, spoiler, it's not. Now, he could be drawing a Path to Exile there, but ends up just taking the 3, and that's where the turn ends. Jonathan gets to untap with Teferi.
Yep, this is pretty great for Sukenik, and likely what we saw that charm going for there was either a lightning bolt or just some Phoenixes to dump. It's kind of a signal that Ross is a little bit light on action here.
So what do you think that means Ross has? Are we looking at things like Lightning Axe, Gut Shot, cards that don't play in the matchup?
Yeah, the thing with this Phoenix deck is a lot of your cards have to be a little bit more proactive, and what that generally translates to is things that kill creatures that can also go upstairs. But if Merriam is just drawn too many of these cards that are reactive, maybe a land or two too many, or just something like Crackling Drake where you don't want to overextend into a Supreme Verdict, then Ross is going to struggle to actually get this Teferi off the table.
Jonathan draws the card for the turn, right now just leaving that graveyard build at 5. On 7, he can transform Search for Azcanta into Azcanta the Sunken Ruin.
Spell Snare in Sukenik's hand, hiding out, ready to punish the next Manamorphose.
Whatever that 2-mana play is going to be. Looks like a backup Teferi, a Secure the Wastes, that Spell Snare we talked about. Sukenik able to untap his Celestial Colonnade thanks to the Teferi activation of +1. It's now sitting on 6 mana. Activating Colonnade here actually is pretty dangerous, especially in a matchup where game 1 the Lightning Axes are still in the deck.
Right, and there's also a point where you might just get ruined if you activate this Colonnade and Merriam flips the thing in the ice.
Right,
if you get your land boomerang.
Right, it's not. Right, it's all non-horror creatures. It's not non-land or anything like that.
Right, exactly. I imagine Thing in the Ice was designed not with creature lands, at the forefront of the wording.
The attack from Arclight Phoenix takes care of the Planeswalker, Teferi off the table, and now Jacevin's Prodigy from Ross. That's the one up in the main deck.
Likely just looking to force some action.
Yes, that will earn the Spell Snare from Sukenik.
That's best possible Spell Snare for Sukenik, I believe. Looking at the list here, other options are Manamorphose and Izzet Charm. Thing in the Ice, maybe.
Ross now tries Crackling Drake. Is that one going to resolve? Snapcaster Mage in Jonathan's hand. Though in his graveyard, there's nothing that immediately deals with that Crackling Drake.
Right, and, I'm a big Elvish Visionary fan, and this is a big Elvish Visionary.
That is a big Elvish Visionary. Search for Azcanta. Top card is Snapcaster Mage. There are already 7 cards in Jonathan's graveyard, so he will be able to transform the enchantment regardless of what he does. But he decides to mill over Snapcaster Mage.
That's always a spot where when you're sitting across the table, it's real hard to suss out what your opponent has in their hand, but you know they have at least one Snapcaster Mage, and they're a little overloaded.
The draw for the turn was Cryptic Command. Jonathan able to go for another Teferi. Actually, what he's going to do is main phase use Azcanta. Only card he can take is a copy of Lightning Helix. Field of Ruin in hand. Now, of note, those 4 lands, there are not 2 blue mana sources, so that Cryptic Command he picked up is not castable.
No, and this is going to be a little bit rough for him in this particular instance.
Yeah. Was that just a mistap?
It looks like it may have been a mistap in this situation, unless he specifically wanted to hold up extra basic planes. There's also a point where he may just be trying to signal something else here.
An attack in. Arclight Phoenix is 3. Crackling Drake's coming in as well, which I believe is for 4. So I think this is a total of 7. We'll confirm on the hit. This looks like Sukenik's taking the whole damage.
there's kind of a point where you don't really want to start firing things off until later on. Looking like there actually may only be a couple of instants and sorceries there.
Yeah, it looks like Cracking Drake is just a 2/4. It's a Manamorphose and an Izzet Charm, so that hit only brought Sukenik down to 12.
Wow. That's a lot of cards in graveyard.
Yeah, for that many, you just assume there'd be more. And a pass back to Sukenik. So despite it being late in the game like this, both players are still playing this very slowly. You see Ross just chipping in with Arclight every turn, not really transforming Thing in the Ice.
If we're being honest, Sukenik hasn't actually done very much this game.
No.
He played a Search for Azcana and he played a Teferi and he's cycled a bunch, but he's kind of just spun his wheels and taken some damage.
Waits till Ross goes to attack. Cryptic Command to tap draw.
That Thing in the Ice will not be blocking.
Yeah. Sukenik down to 11. Now, there is a Lightning Helix in Sukenik's hand. He's not really taking opportunities to remove Arclight Phoenix, even though he's had the mana to do it.
So the idea here is that Sukenik wants to create a situation where Ross spends more resources, creating threats, trying to punch through damage, and makes it so once this Phoenix hits the graveyard, Ross can't just go, all right, opt Serum Vision's Faithless Looting, bring it back out, without actually losing any resources.
Yeah, actually, the thing that Jonathan's prioritizing the most is just activating Azcanta.
Exactly. He's digging for these Path to Exiles as much as possible because he understands that they're going to be taxed, and he just needs to find more copies of them.
Finds a Path to Exile off that Azcanta.
To the main event stage, please. Legacy Classic player Phil Cozen.
And looks like a full 7 cards in Jonathan's hand right now. Snapcaster Mage, Path to Exile, Mana Leak among the holdings.
This is pretty close to what he wants to be doing. This is getting closer and closer to looking like a game that Sukenik actually wins.
Right, this feels like a Jeskai game. He has an Azcanta, he has 10 lands in play, he has a 7-card hand. Right, everything's going according to plan, except for the fact that this board is a bit pesky.
Right, and he's just looking for some way to mop that up, you know, say a Supreme Verdict, for example.
Snapcaster Mage, we'll see what he wants to do with it, whether it's a tap, draw, tap. Tap bounce is probably off the table because a removal spell breaks it up.
Right, and if Sukenik has another counter spell where he maybe thinks it's okay to kind of go for that type of line, he may just want to keep trying to loop the Snapcaster Mage and just buy more time. But it is certainly riskier because it turns on some of Merriam's action in the vein of Gut Shot and Lightning Axe that normally wouldn't have much play here.
So we'll see just what the modes picked. Our players are kind of discussing that. Feels like tap all creatures opponents control is one of the modes here. That one's, yeah.
We're not going bounce draw mid-combat.
This is a last call for our next standard challenge.
It looks as if Sukenik just wanted to make sure he fetched before he actually cast this cryptic command, so he didn't get pantsed by something like Spell Pierce.
Sure. Yeah, fetches for that Plains and draws a second Lightning Helix. Now, we mentioned that those 3 damage effects tend to be dead in the matchup. However, when he has 2 of them, that's how you can convert.
Oh, it's nice. And Helix in particular having 2 modes, or not 2 modes, but 2 functions, means that it even buys time against the Arclight Phoenixes.
And Azcanta picks up another Path to Exile for Jonathan. We're also bolt away the Snapcaster, but now with 2 paths, 2 helixes, it feels like Jonathan's going to be able to clean up this board in the way that he needs to.
Yeah, John has more than a couple of resources.
Yeah, draws Logic Knot. 9 cards in hand. He's going to have to cast some cards here.
Must be tough figuring out exactly what you want to cast.
We'll start with Path to Exile.
really like leading on targeting the thing in the ice here, because if you target anything else and Ross responds, it just effectively counters your path to exile, because the thing in the ice will return them to your hand.
Oh, that's really neat. Right, so you just have to start on this.
Exactly, and it's not as if Sukenik wasn't planning to clean it up anyway. This is just making the decision for him on where we start.
Opt for Ross. Now, if Sukenik wanted to path a second thing, there's actually a way he can do that to play around it now.
So it's a little bit tougher where now, let's say you go and respond and try to path a Crackling Drake, Ross can just respond to this second path
so that's
and
no
do
good.
Another cantrip.
But if he waits until Ross transforms Thing in the Ice, puts the transform trigger on the stack, then there's a window for that path.
Exactly, and it looks like that's what Sukenik's leaning towards.
Okay, so counters removed. The bounce trigger on the stack, Jonathan uses his second path to exile on Crackling Drake.
Big fan of this line.
Right, he doesn't want the Drake back in Ross's hand. That's another card that Ross can draw when he recasts it. So that resolves. Drake's exiled. And still with the bounce trigger on the stack, and this is a huge beating.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So this is the kind of thing we've been seeing all weekend, is Sukenik has adopted this line where he recognizes that Ross doesn't actually have a high density of threats. If he can just pick apart what he has, then Ross won't actually be able to kill him before he dies to a flurry of bolts and helixes.
Right, he's using his own Awoken Horror against him. So Snapcaster Mage, this is still with that Awoken Horror trigger on the stack. Now targeting Path to Exile to get rid of Arclight Phoenix, and then the bounce trigger is going to resolve, and then Jonathan's going to get his Snapcaster Mage back.
So you've been at this a little bit longer than I have. Would you say this has been a good turn?
This has been an excellent turn. Yeah, that Snapcaster goes back to Jonathan's hand. Now the opt resolves, finally digging down that stack, and then it gets pathed. So if you're keeping score at the end of the day, Jonathan spent 2 Path to Exiles and got 3 creatures there.
Right, exactly.
And that's it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, and also he gets to kind of put the fear in Ross, because Ross knows there's a Snapcaster in Sukenik's hand.
Yeah, so that's how to remove 3 creatures with 2 Path to Exiles. Not the easiest feat.
This is how you get to 10-1. Kind of see it on Ross's face a little bit, realizing
he got
this turn was a big shift.
Yeah. And now Sukenik, we know he has Logic Knot in hand, still has Kanta going. The board has been cleared, and he hopes to keep it that way.
I have a list of close games that I keep at home, and this is not going to make the list.
Ross doing a lot of things. That turn is, though, that was the turning point here.
Right, everything kind of seemed at parity. It was, last turn we were talking about how we're so deep in this game and both players are kind of taking their time and grinding it out, and Sukenik had that double path and realized that it was time to go.
He's thinking about using Snapcaster Spell Snare on this Manamorphose. Or rather, actually just going to be a straight Logic Knot for it.
Right, and this is a point where Sukenik is under the impression that Ross is picking this as his turn, so Sukenik knows he's not going to get to activate this search for Azcanta anyway, so you might as well use some of your resources.
Ross tries for a second Manamorphose. Sukenik down to 3 mana, so though he could Snapcaster Spell Snare, he's going to just let these happen now.
Right, Sukenik has a Mana Leak hiding out in his hand. He has this Snapcaster Mage with a Path in Yard that could just clean up anything that Ross tries to put on the battlefield. He's not really under any kind of real threat.
And Ross now going to flashback Faithless Looting. There's some extra mana floating there from that Manamorphose, running why he's just tapping 2. But he's tapped down low enough that Jonathan's going to feel like it's time for Mana Leak. That's going to be a counter spell. Ross has still played enough instants and sorceries to bring back his 1 Arclight Phoenix. So he puts Sukenik down, looks like to 7s. Ross makes some progress on the turn, but there's still all those Lightning Helixes in Jonathan's hand. He hasn't had to use any of them yet.
Yeah, it looks like it's about time for Sukenik to go up to 13, the low life total of almost your full life total.
Yeah, and also that second copy of Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, has been in his hand most of the game. With Ross tapped so low and lower on resources, he might think that it's something he can risk.
Right, and honestly, it's kind of the point where Sukenik's so far ahead, you're probably just looking to kind of put it on the battlefield and tell your opponent, look, this game's over.
Right.
Can we move on? It takes me a while to win. Do you just want to sit here losing for 10 minutes?
Lightning Helix puts Arclight Phoenix into the graveyard, and then Teferi is the follow-up. He will draw a card. That card is Cryptic Command. And Jonathan will move past the turn back with, looks to be 5 untapped lands. Kind of the last window for Ross this game.
Right, exactly. Here, Ross does still have this Arclight Phoenix in graveyard. If he can just cast some spells, this is maybe his last chance to really do anything.
Right, yeah, 5 cards in hand. Ross has play here, but once Jonathan starts untapping with this Azcanta Teferi combination, it's just going to get far worse.
Exactly. You get a free impulse off of this Azcanta, and then you get a card off Teferi, and you get your draw step, and then you get another free impulse when you untap the Azcanta with Teferi.
Because Sukenik has enough lands to do all of this and cast the cards he's drawing.
Exactly, and then after all that's said and done, he'll still have, 5 mana left up?
Yeah. And Faithless Looting from Ross after Thing in the Ice. Flashes back Faithless Looting. Sukenik's going to hold him on that. Now that Arclight Phoenix is going to come back, Ross has cast, this is his 3rd spell. So Jonathan has held him with the ice counter on the stack. Snapcaster Mage, Lightning Helix, Secure the Wastes, Cryptic Command. In Sukenik's hand, just those 4. Snapcaster Mage has more or less its choice of cards. And she says, yeah, that the ice counter can be removed. You can resolve the Faithless Looting. Arclights will come back. That's fine.
Sukenik reaching over, making it a team sport.
Yeah, well, because Ross had said trigger and pointed to it, he can't actually miss it anymore.
Exactly.
So Jonathan, that's not Jonathan helping out. That's him maintaining game state.
Right.
And once they acknowledge the trigger, they can no longer miss it.
Exactly.
Once again, Legacy Classic, that is time.
Ross deciding on that discard. Do you see Arclight Phoenix in the waiting? Let's see at the top of the discard pile. That will be coming back when Ross moves to combat.
Right. It looks like Ross may have discarded a couple of lands to that Faithless Looting.
And Sukenik says, that's fine. You can have the 3-2. And we'll get an attack. And Jonathan going to go with Snapcaster Mage here.
This is a nice sequence. This is a really nice sequence. So we have this Path to Exile in the graveyard that Snapcaster gets to check the Thing in the Ice with, and then after that, Sukenik can just pad his life total a little bit more and Lightning Helix this Arclight Phoenix. And this is all if Sukenik puts Ross on having something like Gut Shot, for example, that could flip this Thing in the Ice for 0 mana.
So Path to Exile going to be the target. Path targeting Thing in the Ice. And that will happen. Ross he'll be exiled. And now Lightning Helix from hand to take care of Arclight Phoenix. And Mutagenic Growth from Ross to save it. That's his one of. Ross goes to 14, and now that means Sukenik will gain 3 and then take 5.
I love a Mutagenic Growth. That is...
I love it, especially out of an Izzet deck.
Oh my.
And the gut shot up clean up from Ross.
My.
So I love the turn from Ross. I'm not sure it's enough. Looking at a board of Teferi and Colonnades.
No, you have to give him points for doing
Oh,
anything.
yeah.
But it is literally he just did anything. It was not much.
It wasn't anything.
He spent a lot of cards to shock his opponent.
Here is Azcanta finding another Path to Exile from Sukenik. See how much more this Ross wants to go through. Once he's out of resources, he may pick him up. Teferi will draws into Electrize. Path takes care of Arclight Phoenix.
It's hard to imagine Ross doesn't feel like he still actually has some game in this because
Right.
he still has 3 Arclight Phoenix left in his deck, right?
Here's Crackling Drake from Ross. That'll earn the Cryptic Command from Jonathan. And you see, as Kanta was able to untap with Teferi, and Jonathan knows he has it. He's moving quick now. Grabs a Hieroglyphic Illumination.
Oh yeah, this is not a if he's going to win this game. It's when he wins this game, and he's just getting around to it as quick as possible.
That clock, right? So we're already halfway through the time for the round. Still in game 1. Jonathan has to be aware of that.
Right, and the thing that Jeskai has to lose here is, so Jeskai has won this game, but it has not literally won the game. But Jeskai cannot win a second game in, say, 5 minutes.
No, not like, right. So this is, if it comes to a game 3, Jonathan needs to make sure he's giving himself enough time to win it.
Exactly, because Izzet Phoenix could just win in, 2 or 3 minutes if you have one of those absurd turn 1 Faithless Looting bend 2 Phoenixes draws.
Yeah, Teferi up to 7 here for Jonathan. Activative Colonnade. Going to hit Ross down to 8. There's a Secure the Waste as well in Sukenik's hand if he decides to put even more pressure on.
Right, and that'll just likely button it up this next turn. You just secure for 1,000,000, and that's going to be good enough.
Thing in the Ice. Jonathan's ready to Cryptic Command just about anything. That includes Thing in the Ice. Draws Lightning Bolt. Here's Manamorphose. It'll be a Logic Knot. Jonathan just countering anything, trying to end the game quickly.
Yep. And now he has to Secure the Waste and a Bolt in his hand that should button it up with that Colonnade.
Yeah, and with that counterspell on the Delve, Ross picks up the cards. So, our first game goes over to Sukenik, and Jeskai Control draws it into the late game and able just to card advantage Ross out of the game.
That felt like a journey.
Yeah.
Felt like we really went somewhere together.
I like the style of the plan that Jonathan's using here. At no point did he really take the attack. Right,
No.
he was defensive. A lot of times you see Jeskai decks have to turn the corner. The corner wasn't really turned there.
No, Sukenik kind of taking a pretty firm stance to just say, you know what, I'll win when I feel like it.
Yeah, just prove to me that you can win.
As
I'm
long
gonna
as
play
I
defense.
don't lose, I'm going to kill you. So let's just kind of, I'm going to hold you at bay a little bit, and then a little bit, and then a lot bit, and then somehow you've died.
All right, players quick on the sideboards here, seeing some paying attention to the clock. On Ross's side, he's got some removal. Don't think we see any of that, but there are cards that interact against a control deck.
Exactly. The things that we're going to be looking for out of Ross's sideboard are things like Dispel, Spell Pierce, Snapcaster Mage is something that helps him go longer in games. You can maybe make a case for something like Blood Moon if you're trying to just knock out Sukenik's Cryptic commands or punk him out of some games if he doesn't respect Blood Moon. And there's even a slight point for Surgical Extraction. If you just tag all of Sukenik's Path to Exiles, Sukenik's going to have a hard time answering Merriam's threats.
Right, now on Jonathan's side, he does have some ways to more permanently answer threats. I actually really like the card Celestial Purge in this matchup, the top of his sideboard.
Right, that is just going to tag basically anything but a Thing in the Ice that you're that worried about.
Right, and that Exile Clause, very nice against something like Arclight Phoenix. Now, how do you feel about Jonathan, maybe due to the clock or maybe due to the matchup, bringing in something like Lyra Dawnbringer or Baneslayer Angel?
I'm a fan of the big angels just because Ross can't really afford to leave in things to the effect of Lightning Axe, but that's also his best answer to them. So as long as you could keep, say, Thing in the Ice in check, then these angels are going to take over the game because no matter how big something like a Crackling Drake gets, Lyra or Baneslayer are just going to first strike them down.
So if you're looking for some of the most recent advice here on the SCG Tour, Ross Merriam, a regular writer over at the site, a frequent writer of the Star City Games newsletter. This is in addition to all the content you see in the articles on the website. This is something that is exclusive and comes straight to your email inbox.
I'm a big fan of those. It's almost just like getting free articles straight into your email every single week.
And Jonathan Sukenik picking up that win, the 26-year-old here from South Plainfield, New Jersey. No fractions at all. 7.0 opens played, 1.0 open top eights. Just some clean numbers there.
Look, he's just been doing the best that he can for a long time, okay?
Yeah, still looking for that first win here on it. That was last year, did not have a win. He has 8 all-time top 8s. Last year, though, kind of reserved on the tour, just showing up occasionally.
Yeah, he's a Northeast player that kind of just shows up when he has the time to do so, but he's one of the more consistent players on the tour where even though his top eights might not be the highest number we've ever seen, he's always finishing in the money, and he's so tight. He plays so well.
Yeah, and both these players, remember, there are 5 players mentioned right now at 10-1. So a win here, if he can take the second game, is going to get him looking at, I would say, a very close spot to open top 8, number 7.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's the point where it's unlikely, but you could even maybe try to finagle your way into a triple draw into top 8.
Ooh, that would be a spicy line.
I mean, that's 36 match points.
Yeah, so it's actually interesting. That adds up. The problem always has to do with the path there. So you can is that you'll get to 35, you'll sit down with your last point and say, hey, draw to 36, but then your opponent will probably only have 33 points, and then they'll say no, and then suddenly you're in a win-in.
What a jerk.
Yeah, if you could...
Who just says no?
Right. But it would get me into top 8. I mean,
exactly. Don't they understand Jonathan Sukenik has a player profile to build here?
So, game 2. Man, what a thing. That was a long game 1.
Yeah, I already said it once. It just felt like we went through so much.
Right. Now let's back it up, do it again. Ross on the play here for the second game.
Ross is really looking for one of those more explosive draws in order to finish it out. You know, Merriam may have been under the impression before he could go long, but with Sukenik's version of the deck, it just is not as possible as one would assume. And post-board, it gets worse.
Well, let's talk about Thing in the Ice. Ross's turn 2 play was a copy of Thing in the Ice. It didn't transform until turn 7, and when it did, the only thing it bounced was Sukenik's Snapcaster Mage.
Yeah, that didn't go well.
Yeah, right? He not only does he need some early pressure, but he actually is rather specific as to the type of pressure he wants.
Exactly. The big thing that he's going to be looking for is just a million copies of Arclight Phoenix, because Sukenik doesn't have anything like Terminus that's going to get all of them out at one time. Sukenik actually just has to kind of remove them or exile them one single card at a time. And that's not as realistic if Ross just is able to turbo 2 or 3 copies in his graveyard in the first turn or 2.
Ross keeping on 6, and we are underway. Game number 2, just under 18 minutes. Turn 1, Thought Scour from Ross. That'll target himself. Mills over. Looks like we have a Manamorphose and a Faithless Looting.
Free real estate.
Yeah, that's going to pump that Crackling Drake down the road.
Oh, yeah. It's basically like he drew 2 cards, though, because he had a flashback spell.
Did hit Faithless Looting. So that's 2 more cards, so he drew 3 cards.
I don't like the math, because he drew the Faithless Looting, he drew the card off the Thought Scour, and then Faithless Looting draws. This is like drawing 4 cards.
Right, but Faithless Looting is -1 because you have to cast it. So when you cast it, it's like discarding a card.
Well, but you're not casting it from your hand, so it's...
Well, it's kind of in our hand. We're counting it from our hand.
Basically, this Thought Scour drew 6 cards, because it milled 2 as well.
At least 6.
Minimum.
Right, there's the draw card on Thought Scour.
Thank you. Yes.
Right, I'd missed that.
It's all right. I'm here for you.
Thing in the Ice, first threat played. That's turn 3 by Ross, and Sukenik will just spell snare that.
You don't have to get fancy with it every time.
No, sometimes they just play a 2-mana card, and you spell snare it. Field of Ruin. Sukenik now with the option of leaving up Logic Knot or making search for Azcanta. Decides it's okay to be shields down for a turn. He'll make the enchantment.
You got to pick your spots to develop, and if you don't put Ross on just having something like a Crackling Drake right off the bat here, this is a good spot to do it, because the longer you wait, the more mana that Miriam's going to have access to.
Ross triple Spire Bluff Canal, but the only punish here is he'll flashback Faithless Looting, so I think drawing 6 more cards here is about right, and then he has to discard, well, some of them, but we don't count those.
No. Absolutely not. No one ever says that part of it.
I'm so disappointed. The Mutagenic Growth was discarded. Ross, what are you doing?
Can we?
Yeah.
Are you? That was like the best thing he did last game.
Yeah, and right. If I crinkle up this ball paper, I wonder if I can hit him from here. It'd be quite the throw.
We'll exchange words after this.
That's.
We have strong feelings about Mutagenic Growth here on the SCG tour. They are positive.
He left it in. I appreciate that.
Good. It counters Lightning Bolt.
Well, not anymore. And opt end step from Ross. Sukenik really playing this one slow. He decided to play his Hallowed Fountain tapped, even with Hieroglyphic Illumination in hand. Just wants to hold up, I believe, Lightning Helix and Logic Knot.
Right. The idea here is that Sukenik is looking to either just Field of Ruin here and find a red source instead, or just planning to use that Logic Knot, since this is the first turn that Ross is going to have all this access to a Crackling Drake that he can just jam.
Faith suiting again from Ross. He's doing a lot of things, but at the same time, Ross isn't doing much.
He's not doing things. He's doing one thing, and that's spinning wheels in the mud.
See, I don't mind playing cantrips into more cantrips.
Yeah.
I like that.
It's what's the flavor text on Remand? Is it at least all that babbling and hand waving looked nice?
Yeah.
That's basically kind of what's going on here. Lots of babbling and hand waving.
Here is that Field of Ruin from Sukenik now. He does have one basic mountain, so we'll fix that mana there.
Lightning Helix online.
4 cards in graveyard. Last game, it was really that transform Search for Azcanta that ended up being the win condition for Sukenik.
That's a lot of why we're seeing all these Field of Ruins, all these extra copies of Hieroglyphic Illumination in his deck. Sukenik has a plan, and Search
Build
for
the graveyard.
Azcanta is the plan.
Plan was to find a 5th land, but he did not. Just passes back to Ross.
Oh, I guess he has to settle for a Path to Exile.
Right. I mean, it's not too bad. He does have multiple Paths to Exiles here.
This is setting up a nightmare scenario with a Surgical Extraction.
What do you mean? Oh, if Ross has one?
Yeah. Ross has 2 out of the
Has 2 in the
sideboard
board.
that he could be bringing in to try and just say, all right, Path to Exile is the most important card. Let's tag him.
He's going to go straight for Blood Moon here. That's the Haymaker play. Now, Sukenik will certainly try to Logic Knot.
Yeah, I mean, it's that or you don't cast the Logic Knot ever, so here we go.
Here's Logic Knot. Delves away 3. It'll counter the Blood Moon. Now that sets back Search for Azcanta.
Merriam with an awkward Is It Charm in hand that he couldn't fight with.
No, Sukenik still had 2 mana up. And I do like that from Sukenik there, that he delved 3 and tapped no more mana. That's a really heads-up play.
Oh, yeah. Is It Charm and Spell Piercer things that have to be on his radar in this kind of matchup.
Still no 5th land for Sukenik. Ross does have one of his sideboard Surgical Extractions in hand. So now normally you don't see someone board in Surgical Extraction against a deck like Jeskai. Why does it make sense from Ross?
So the reason is just that there's one specific card that is the most important card, and if Sukenik does not have access to any of that card, it's going to swing the advantage bar over the course of a long game into Miriam's favor.
And this is Path to Exile?
Yes, exactly.
A flashback Faithless Looting from Merriam. We see 1 Arclight Phoenix. It might be 2 Arclight Phoenix.
I believe that's 2.
All right, so spell number 1. Now, these spells, even if they're countered, are still going to count toward the Phoenix.
Yep.
Surgical Extraction is spell 2. Looks like he's extracting Logic Knot. And yes, there's 3 Paths to Exiles in Sukenik's hand.
Sukenik just going, I still have all these.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Helping him out, takes care of the other 2 Logic Knots. So now if you're on Ross's side, okay, well, now we need another Surgical Extraction. Hold on.
Oh, good grief. Oh, good grief.
3 paths, Lightning Helix, Electrolyze, and Snapcaster Mage. Yeah.
See Ross kind of shuffling his hand, just going, well, gotta get through. The only way out's through.
Here's Serum Visions. Is he just looking for the second Surgical? Or maybe a Snapcaster? Right, you can't make enough Arclights to beat this.
Right, so the issue is Sukenik's going to get these 2 Arclights no matter what.
Right.
Even if he were to cast the first path, Ross lets it resolve, Sukenik could just...
Path the other one.
Exactly. Even though Ross would have priority to Surgical, you just respond to the Surgical with the other path, and life goes on.
Both Drakes are gone. Ross gets all the remaining land basics out of his deck. Back to Sukenik we go. He draws Arid Mesa.
So the Snapcaster is strong because it can path things, but it is a little bit awkward.
Now, something you may notice that Sukenik is doing, he's, in the interest of time, he's agreeing to play the known cards in his hand face up. A lot of times in the situation, what will happen is Ross would write down the cards, and then Sukenik would pick up his hand But both players are aware of the time issue, so they are agreeing to this shortcut. When Sukenik draws a card, he's going to put it face down on top of the other 4.
Exactly, and there's a point where, sure, it only takes 30 seconds to write it down, but there's also, how much time do you think you actually lose over the course of a game just looking at your pad and reading and then thinking about it?
Path to Exile from Ross, and I like this from Sukenik. He's going to Surgical on Path. Sukenik's going to defend against it. He's going to play Snapcaster Mage and Path his own Snapcaster Mage, using the Path to Exile that was targeted so that Surgical Extraction doesn't resolve.
Sometimes you just need a 3-mana Rampant Growth that also counters a spell. It's really nice.
That means the Path to Exile in Sukenik's hand, still live. Ross will make an Arclight Phoenix. He'll swing.
Caw.
Yeah, Jonathan will have the answer to that. It's another path. He's mad. This will be the 3rd Arclight Phoenix he's put into exile.
And, ooh.
Ross counters with Is It Charm. And then the 3 damage will come in. No more play on Sukenik's side. Now, his last 2 cards are both still removal spells for Arclight Phoenix.
Right, and this is actually one of the drawbacks of Path playing such a big role in the matchup, is Merriam has so much mana.
Right.
He did so much that turn and still has 1 up.
5 mana. Looks like Jonathan, what a play. He mills over Lightning Helix, but draws Lyra Dawnbringer, makes the Angel. And now it's the question is if Ross has kept a Lightning Axe in his deck.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That is, that's a big one. That's a big one. And that's not the kind of card you can just ignore either.
Well, not yet. He starts with Manamorphose. Two, three, four, 5. It's just Crackling Drake. I was wondering whether they're going to see the 6-mana Lightning Axe. It does have the second mode.
I guess we are in that territory,
oh, yeah.
aren't we?
You're not even discarding a card. We're just casting it.
Oh, my. How big is this before I first strike it?
Both players counting. Yeah.
It's a colossal 4. Of course.
Wound Halo from Sukenik out of the sideboard. I'm assuming it's going to name Crackling Drake.
Yeah,
why
that
not?
seems like the thing.
And it is.
Yeah, so by my math, Arclight Phoenix doesn't kill you, and Crackling Drake does.
Sukenik starts connecting with Lyra Dawnbringer. And Ross looks to 18 and 7. He extends the hand. No way around it. At the 4th Arclight and a Spell Piercer's hand, we're not going to stop the Angel. And 2-0, Jonathan Sukenik is your winner.
That was an incredibly commanding showing.